Welcome everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join myself, Nicholas Avramis, and the Beaver Immigration team for our first installment of our live webinars we hope to do on a bi-weekly basis. Today we're going to be discussing Canada, the federal government's premier business immigration program, the Startup Visa program. So I'm hoping there's a lot of entrepreneurs, innovators out there watching us today. So a quick disclaimer, I am not a visa officer and I do not work for the Canadian government. Beaver Immigration is a Canadian immigration consulting firm that's licensed by the federal regulator in Canada, and we're based here in South Africa, primarily serving the South African market and Sub-Saharan market. Another thing, Beaver Immigration does not do job recruitment. We are not authorized to do this type of work. We do assist, however, professionals in securing their work permits after they do successfully land employment in Canada. So I quickly wanted to tell you about Beaver Immigration. Beaver Immigration is a South African-based company. We have offices in both Toronto, Canada, and here in Johannesburg. As I mentioned to you, we're fully licensed by the regulator that regulates Canadian immigration consulting around the world. My name is Nicholas Avramis. I'm a registered Canadian immigration consultant based here in Johannesburg. And we primarily do three types of visas at Beaver Immigration. We do skilled worker, which is synonymous with Canada's flagship visa immigration program, the Federal Skilled Worker Visa Program, which we hope to do a presentation on in the coming weeks. We also do student visas, which is a very popular way for people to immigrate to Canada, and we're definitely going to be doing a study visa presentation. But Beaver's core business is business immigration. That is really what we do, and business immigration, whether it's transferring a company to Canada or through investment or entrepreneurship programs, is a big part of the Canadian immigration system, and we're going to carefully unpack that for you today. In terms of today's agenda, I'm going to give all the people out there a quick overview of Canada so you understand how the country works, because it has direct implications on the Canadian immigration system. Then we're briefly going to touch on the express entry system, and again, we'll hopefully be able to do a presentation on express entry in the coming weeks. Then we'll quickly introduce business immigration, and then we'll specifically talk about the Startup Visa program, which we specialize in and we get a lot of inquiries in, and that's the majority of our clients choose to immigrate to Canada by pursuing their permanent residency through the Startup Visa program. And then hopefully we'll have some time towards the end of today's presentation for some questions. So my assistant here is watching the comment section. So if you have any specific questions, particularly with the Startup Visa program, please write them down in the comment section and we'll try to get to them towards the end. But the best way to get a hold of us is to email us at info@beaverimmigration.com, which we'll leave up towards the end of the presentation. So, a very quick history of Canada in under 2 minutes. The settlers first started to arrive in Canada around the 1500s, and it was primarily the French and English. That's why Canada is a bilingual country, with the French language and English language. It is a myth in many markets that you need to be able to speak French to immigrate to Canada. This is not true. English is spoken in 80% of the country. If you can speak French, especially from our friends in the West African region, it will help your chances as we have many French language-driven visa programs, and in the point system, it helps you. With that being said, Canada has had a peaceful past. We peacefully broke away from the United Kingdom in the 1930s, and we had our constitution in 1982. And the motto of Canada is peace, order, and good government. Hence, Canada is a very peaceful nation, as we haven't had a troubled past. Canada is a regional-based country. We have two levels of government. We have the federal government, which is the government of Canada, and then we have 10 provinces. All right. Many of you are familiar with them. We have British Columbia out west, where Vancouver is. We have Ontario, which is one of the largest provinces, where Toronto is. And then we have Quebec, which is the French-speaking part. It's important to understand that the federal government, or the government of Canada, is responsible in terms of how the country works as a whole. The provinces, their responsibility is to deliver the services to the people. This includes healthcare, education, power, infrastructure. So with that being said, when it comes to immigration, the government of Canada is responsible for the entire immigration system. They have the final authority on who can enter the country, when they can enter the country, and how they can enter the country. With that being said, because the 10 provinces are unique in nature in terms of their socioeconomic characteristics, they each have their own provincial nomination programs that they use to attract skilled workers, international students, and of course, entrepreneurs. And they do this by creating what we call PNPs, provincial programs. So sometimes people get very confused because we almost have two immigration systems working in parallel. We have the provinces with their own ministries and their own programs. And at the same time, we have the federal government, which manages the entire system and has the final say. But we'll come back to this idea of provincial programs at a later stage, because today we're just focusing on a specific federal program. If you're thinking of entering or immigrating to Canada, this is the best time to do it. Canada's in its 5th wave of immigration. The last time Canada let in this many immigrants at the same time was right after the Second World War. So the quota for 2021 is 401,000 people, okay? For 2022, it's 411,000, and for 2023, it's 421,000 new permanent residents. Now, these permanent residents that are going to come to Canada, they're going to immigrate through a variety of what we call streams, okay? Some of it may be humanitarian and compassionate, refugees. A big chunk will be through family sponsorship, bringing spouses, parents, grandparents. But by far, 60% of all new permanent residents will come through what we call economic immigration, which we're going to talk about. So, when looking at immigration as a whole, it really falls into 4 classes or 4 buckets. We have the family class, we have refugees, humanitarian, compassionate, but by far the biggest immigration class in Canada is what we call economic immigration, okay? 60% of permanent residents, temporary workers, come through what we call economic immigration. So what is economic immigration? It's basically a catch-all for those foreigners who have entered Canada through a job offer. They've gone through a federal visa program, such as the Federal Skilled Worker Program. They've acquired Canadian experience through what we call the Canadian Experience class. They've come in through one of the provinces, let's say an entrepreneurship program or an investor visa. They've bought a business, perhaps, or they've come in through intercompany transfer, okay? Also included this is the Startup Visa program, which we're going to talk about shortly. With that being said, I just quickly wanted to touch on talking about express entry. In all of those programs I just mentioned, all roads to permanent residency typically go through express entry. Express entry is essentially the management system that Canada uses to prioritize which applications for permanent residency they are going to deal with first. And they do this by awarding points out of 1,200, and they rank them, and there's a draw, okay? So most programs, whether it's skilled worker or coming in through the provinces, you will eventually have to go through the point system or express entry. So let's talk about business immigration, which accounts for a very large chunk of immigration in Canada and who comes in, okay? But let's talk about why Canada promotes business immigration, okay? Well, first of all, it brings in billions of dollars into the country because it's direct foreign investment, okay? Small, medium-sized enterprises accounts for 80% of the government's tax revenue. Foreign investment is a major driver of jobs and innovations in the country, helps boost trade and diversity. Another reason why business immigration is promoted by the Canadian government is Canada has an aging population, okay? Over the next 10 years, the Conference Board of Canada estimates why do investors, not only from South Africa but around the world, choose Canada as a destination for business? First of all, it's a very stable economy and we have a stable government. There's a solid banking system. We have rule of law and land rights. We have generally favorable tax rates for small, medium-sized enterprises, depending on what industry you're in, which part of the country you're in. So Canada is competitive. Another major reason why foreigners like to come in is preservation of capital and a currency hedge, because now you're trading in Canadian and US dollars. Another major reason foreigners choose to come to Canada to set up operation is its easy access to the US market, okay? A lot of investors do not want a domicile in the US for various reasons. Through the trade agreements, as a Canadian permanent resident, as a Canadian business, you have generally So let's start understanding is Canada has a variety of visa programs, provincial programs, and let's say allowances in the system that allow foreigners to come in. So the first thing when we're talking to a client or when you're considering migration is to decide on which visa class you are going to pursue. You could come in on temporary work permits, let's say through an intercompany transfer. You can choose to apply through one of the provincial entrepreneurship or investment programs, or you can choose one of the federal programs that the Government of Canada offers, okay? The next thing we need to determine is the business strategy. Are you going to buy an existing business? Are you going to start a new business? Also, there's the option of transferring a business, okay? Once the business strategy is formalized, the third thing in conjunction with all of these is we have to make sure the applicant meets the qualifications of the visa program they are pursuing, okay? So, every visa program in Canada, well, I shouldn't say every visa program, but all the business immigration programs will require applicants to write an English test, okay? A formalized business plan. You will require to show proof of funds to support yourself and your family when you enter Canada. And most require the entrepreneur investor to explain how they will. Okay. Let's talk about the Startup Visa Program. We get a lot of questions on the Startup Visa Program, and we do a lot of Startup Visa Program applications here in Beaver, at Beaver Immigration here in South Africa. This is a very unique and specialized visa program. No other country has one exactly like this. The US sort of does, but the Startup Visa is very unique in nature. Before we start talking about the requirements, we need to understand the genesis of this program and why the Government of Canada offers this program. The program was actually started in 2013 as a pilot program, and in 2015 it became an official Government of Canada visa program for permanent residency. The reason it was created was the Canadian government came to the conclusion that it was lagging behind in innovation, especially in the realm of technological innovation, okay? And they fully appreciated that there was entrepreneurs and innovators around the world who needed larger markets to come in with their innovative ideas to be able to scale up that idea, okay? So, the guiding principle of the Startup Visa Program is to target entrepreneurs with the skills and potential to build businesses in Canada that are innovative, can create Canadian jobs, and can compete on a global scale. It's important to understand with the Startup Visa, unlike any other Government of Canada or Canadian business immigration visa, there is no investment requirement for this visa. In other words, you are not obligated to spend capital in Canada. Another key characteristic of this program compared to other Canadian visa programs, other visa programs in the US or in Europe, this is not a performance-based visa program. In other words, if your company fails in the first 3 months, 6 months, a year, your status in Canada is not contingent on your success. So you do not have to sign a performance agreement. The reason is the Canadian government fully appreciates that entrepreneurs who are coming in with cutting edge technology or unique IP, they're not going to perform very well if, there's a chance they may be asked to leave the country if their business fails. That's too much pressure. That's a recipe for failure. At the same time, startup companies have a high rate of failure. What the government is interested in is the IP, okay? What are you coming in? Can you create Canadian jobs? Can you scale up globally, right? So, let's talk about the eligibility of this program. And unlike all the other visa programs that have dozens of requirements, there's 4 key requirements for the Startup Visa Program, okay? And I'm going to carefully unpack those for you. The first is you have to establish a company in Canada, which is very easy to do. And up to 5 foreign partners of the startup can come to Canada, but each one has to have at least 10% of the company, 10% ownership or voting rights. It's very simple and straightforward. The second requirement is each partner has to write an English test, and they have to score a Canadian language benchmark of 5 in reading, speaking, listening, and writing. That is bare minimum. The third requirement is when you make your application for permanent residency, you have to show the government, depending on your family size, that you have proof of funds to settle in Canada, that you have cash in the bank, or liquidity, okay? So for a family of 2, that's about $16,000 Canadian, okay? The fourth and most important criteria for eligibility and acceptance into this federal program for permanent residency is you have to obtain a letter of support from a designated organization in Canada. This is where there's a lot of confusion in this program. What is a designated organization? A designated organization, as defined by the Government of Canada, is either an angel investor fund, venture capital firm, or a business incubator that IRCC has authorized to provide letters of support to applicants along with commitment certificates to the government. What does all that mean? Well, when the government came up with this program in and around 2013, they realized that their visa officers may not have the skills, foresight, and knowledge to assess, valuable IP or the next big thing, right? So they approached Canadian venture capital firms, angel investors, and business incubators. And they basically deputized them as designated organizations. And they told them, immigrant entrepreneurs will come to you, they will pitch you their ideas through business plans, and if you think that their IP is innovative, has the potential to create Canadian jobs, and has the potential to scale up, we want you to write them letters of support. Okay? And with that letter of support, the entrepreneur can apply for immediate work permits to enter the country and permanent residency. Okay. So, based on the rules, in order to obtain a letter of support from an angel investor in Canada that's listed as a designated organization, you have to secure at least $75,000 in investment. Okay? For a venture capital firm on the list of designated organizations, it's about $200,000. However, the government also approached what we call business incubators. Okay? And business incubators are essentially labs or think tanks that help companies that come into Canada through a variety of support and tools hatch their idea and scale up. Okay? So, if you're able to obtain a letter of support from a business incubator, again, no financing is required or investment from the business incubator, but if they welcome you in, they will issue a letter of support and send the government a commitment certificate that they're backing your idea. So, a common question we get asked, who's eligible? What are they looking for? What are successful companies? Well, obviously the startup visa program, officially there is no list, okay? There is a technology focus, obviously, but Beaver deals with companies across every industry. The SUV program is looking to attract the most innovative companies, entrepreneurs in all types of industries. The most common ones are things in fintech, arts and entertainment, consumer packaged goods, the Internet of Things, blockchain technology, food tech, property tech, cloud technology, retail tech, you name it, okay? As we enter the fourth industrial revolution, as business practices become digitized, the government is looking for the next big thing, okay? And when I mean the next big thing, ideally they'd like to find the next billion-dollar company, a unicorn, but, not all the companies are going to get there, right? Again, the Startup Visa program is designed for innovative companies or innovative ideas that need a larger, more stable market, okay? So, what are the angel investors usually looking for? Angel investors are usually looking for startup companies that are in what we define TRL, Technological Readiness Level 1 to 4, okay? So an angel investor will look at, a theoretical application, whether it's proven in its environment, very theoretical stuff. Venture capital firm will look at technical, logical readiness level 5 to 9, as per the government's criteria. And that is it's being beta tested, it has traction all the way to 9, where it's in its industry or environment and it's ready to be executed. Business incubators, however, they have a very broad spectrum of the type of businesses they'll invite, okay? Most business incubators, they'll be somewhat industry specific, okay? Some of them like to focus on clean tech, other ones like to focus on med tech or consumer packaged goods. But again, the business incubator will work with a startup company that's just in its infancy, let's say in its first couple of months, first year, all the way up to established companies who have a new product or idea that they want to go global with, okay? So what is the process? How does this all work? How does this visa program work? We need to assess your idea and your eligibility for the program, right? What is your English language speaking requirements? Do you have a business set up? We need to set up a business for you in Canada and assess the business here in your home country. And then we need to approach incubators or designated organizations based on our knowledge of what these incubators or designated organizations are looking for. Where do you fit in, okay? Once we obtain a letter of support from a business incubator, we apply for permanent residency. But it's important to understand that in the startup visa program, the application for permanent residency is a paper-based application. We actually have to mail it in, okay? Not all of the Canadian immigration system has been digitized as of yet. So the processing of this PR application can take anywhere between 6 to 12 to 18 months. COVID has created a major backlog. However, because the Government of Canada wants immigrant entrepreneurs in the country as soon as possible to start working with the incubator, start working on their idea, you have the option to apply for work permits, okay? They don't want startup companies or entrepreneurs and innovators waiting 12 months to 18 months working on their idea in their home country because the business may fail. So they'd rather have you come into Canada where you're working with a business incubator, where you have access to industry, access to legal advice, access to marketing advice, so they can help hatch your idea. Immediately come in, you can wait in your home country until your PR comes through. But in the vast majority of the cases, entrepreneurs want to enter Canada immediately, okay? And it should be noted that your spouse will come in on an open work permit, and if you have dependent children under the age of 22, they will come in on study permits, okay? So what is the timeline for this? So usually when a company comes to us, we need to prepare for which incubators we approach and how we approach them. A lot of that is refining what the pitch is through the business plan and what the exact technology that they want to bring to Canada. And what I mean by that is, we deal with very small companies, we deal with very large companies, okay? You can't come in with all your ideas. You have to pick one, right? And we have to make sure there's technological innovation there, there's something new about it, okay? Then we have to make sure that each and every partner is ready for immigration. What does that mean? Do they have passports, birth certificates, medical exams, police clearance certificates? All of these things take time. So it's usually about 2 or 3 months of prep work. Then, once we get the commitment certificate, we can immediately apply for work permits. Now, it used to be that we could get work permits in about 60 days. COVID has delayed that. So we're looking at a minimum of 4 months. At the same time, we're putting in applications for permanent residency for all of the founding partners and their family members. These are paper-based applications, and we have to mail them off to Canada. Pre-COVID, clients were getting their PR cards in about 6 to 8 months. Now with a tremendous backlog at IRCC, we're looking at 12 to 16 months, okay? So, what are the pros of this program? Why do entrepreneurs seek this program? Why is there such demand for this program? Well, one, it's cost efficient. As I mentioned to you, there is no capital requirement, okay? In the numerous investment requirements, or in the numerous visa programs, mainly through the provinces, those investment requirements can be anywhere between 100,000 Canadian all the way up to 800,000 Canadian. Okay, so you're looking at anywhere between 2 million rand up to 9 million rand that you are obligated to invest in the country. Another advantage of the Startup Visa program is because it's a federal-based program, you're not obligated to remain in a specific province or region of the country. Another great thing about the Startup Visa program is not only are you permitted to apply for immediate permanent residency, you can apply for a work permit. However, in most cases, to apply for any type of work permit in Canada, you have to obtain what's known as a labor market impact assessment. And we'll eventually do a presentation on LMIA. But SUV applicants are LMIA exempt. In other words, there's no need to go post a job and apply for the job you're coming to. Another advantage is there's no requirement for you to enter the express entry system. That's why I touched on the express entry point system at the beginning of the presentation, is you do not have to enter the pool. You are granted immediate permanent residency, okay? Another key pro of this program is there's no site visit required. In mostly all of the other business immigration programs, especially the provincial ones, you are obligated to come visit Canada and do an exploratory visit prior to any application. In Startup Visa program, this is not required.